Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you. Welcome to the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast, episode 19. We have a new release-ish to talk about this time. My name is Nick, and I'm joined as usual by my better half, Snoggle, aka Becky. How are you tonight, Snoggle?
I'm doing great. I had an excellent weekend, as you know, but the listeners may not. It was my birthday, and we did lots of fun activities.
What was your most fun activity that you did for your birthday?
Oh, you already know. Bruce and Nick surprised me with an escape room. And I absolutely love puzzles. It is my third escape room I've done, and we escaped. It was so much fun.
Yeah, if not, we wouldn't be recording because we'd still be trapped in that room.
Although it seems like they've had some issues in the past because they were like, just so you know, you're not really locked in here.
Yeah.
So if you need to come out, you can. And then they also instructed us several times not to rip the fake animals off the wall. So I'm like, there have been incidents.
And in all instances, those animals were part of the puzzles. So it made sense that you didn't want to move them, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So this time we're talking about something a little bit different. The thing we're talking about is Ghost Machine's first Tales of the Unnamed book, which is really exciting because we really like the Unnamed universe and how it's a shared thing. And we always talk about how it reminds us of other cool shared universes. It's called The Blizzard, and we're going to talk about it thoroughly. We're going to do our thing, but just want to let everybody know that's what this episode is about. It's not one issue. It's not 12 issues. It's 12 short stories collected in one book.
It's very ironic to me. While reading the book called The Blizzard, it was like 95 degrees outside.
What's the temperature right here, right now? In, of all places, Cincinnati, Ohio.
Well, it's almost 7 o'clock, and it is 91 degrees outside. And for about the third or fourth day in a row, we have an air quality alert until midnight. So they're like, hey, stay inside. It's so hot, you cannot breathe when you walk outside. Very similar to a blizzard, but like a heat blizzard.
A heat blizzard. And you could even say, foreshadowing, it's monstrous.
Oh, it is monstrous.
Bum, bum, bum. All right, so that's the issue we're going to talk about. But as usual, we do need to do a shout out. And this time, the shout out is to a couple of fans. Shout outs. We have started to be fortunate enough to have folks who will reach out and express their enjoyment of the show or heckle us. We love that too. If you want, we want the feedback. We had some folks on Facebook recently mention how they like the sound effects, which really gave me some serious validation. So thank you to Neil and Joe who said that.
I'm assuming that they were also talking about my personal sound effects.
Now that I reflect upon it, I'm sure they were only talking about your, the ones that you brought to the
maybe show. As a laugh, if we were all having a laugh.
Giggity.
Yeah.
But we have several new folks who have jumped on there and said, hey, I like the show, or gave feedback about a particular episode. And one of those is John Farrer. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's on Instagram. He follows us. And he's a proficient bassist. He's got like one picture on his thing and one...
Slapping the bass. On.
Yeah, no, but you can see it. Like that's his only thing on his Instagram is a video of him playing bass, and it links to his YouTube where there's like a bunch of cool stuff. I guess he's very, very good.
I've not met a person who plays the bass that wasn't like a down-to-earth human being.
There you go.
They're the rhythm man.
The rhythm man. John the rhythm man.
Yeah.
Who knows? But thank you, John. You've commented and a couple of things. And you've also had some really cool questions out there that have sparked great conversation. Also, shout out to Gregory Fitch. He's one of the newer members of the Facebook group. He gave some great feedback to us, which meant the world. And Erica Ryder, that's who I mentioned, had some feedback about the Brian Hitch episode and how that impacted her. And that was pretty neat to me as well. So I want everybody to know every one of those little notes that you leave us, letting us know these types of things. It's what really pushes us to find the time to do this. And it's what makes this awesome for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk about the news?
Of course I do. There are some expos coming up in Chicago and Toronto. And the word on the street is they announced a dinner where you can get a copy of the Ghost Machine #1. Gold? Does that mean it's in gold? Like gold?
No.
It's shiny?
It's a metal cover, because metal covers are a thing. And it is the color of gold. But it is not made of gold, as far as I know. If so, I got a really good deal on mine. And we're no longer worrying about grading it.
I mean, that's really awesome. I'm also assuming if you're at dinner and you get that copy, you would probably also get it signed.
I imagine so, but I recall there were a few people at MegaCon who got those. That's the only place they've really been seen. And some people wanted to divide up all their signatures. But there's been a few floating out there on the eBay, I think, that I've seen with a ton of signatures on them.
On the eBay?
On the,
A little birdie also rumored that the entire Geiger crew is going to be in Chicago.
Yeah, I was curious if that would include Gary Frank, too, since he is not as commonly seen at conventions, I believe, and he lives in Italy. So,
is Chicago this weekend?
Chicago is the weekend of the Saturday of it is the 17th, so it's the 16th through the 18th. But those are two pretty exciting expos. One of these days, amidst our schedules, we'll have to find time to be able to actually go to one of those things.
That's true.
So before we dive in to this frigid, stormy situation, what do we have to do? God, it's painful.
That is my spoiler alert sound effect. We did ask people to vote last episode, so I highly recommend maybe voting so you guys never have to hear that again. I think it's hysterical, but I digress. This is where you gotta pause if you haven't read The Blizzard, which I believe the majority of comic book fans have had 2 years. I'm gonna call myself out. I just read it last week. But if you haven't read it, pause, go to your local comic book store or get on Hoopla and download it and read it. I guess you can do Goodreads and all that, right? Amazon.
You can buy it on Comixology,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Which is what I read it on.
Yep.
So if you haven't read this, then you need to stop, read it, and come back. We'll be waiting for you so we can all deep dive together.
So you're not actually at fault if you haven't read this since it came out, because here's what we want to clarify. Now, this book has a lot of conceptual things. We have to set some expectations before we start reading it. This isn't like us reading another issue of the ongoing series that we typically talk about. And you said you haven't read it, even though it came out a while ago. This was released. You read it in the format it is now. This was released over the course of 12 months in tiny little short stories in the Image 30th Anniversary Anthology series, which we put a video on this last Speculator Sunday up about that. You can see examples of it. And so that series was like each issue was thicker, like oversized, with a nicer binding, but it was like a bunch of short stories that were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Image Comics forming, and then it allowed several independent creators to put their little short stories into these books over the course of 12 months. This is the one that Jeff Johns did. A lot of people haven't read it because they didn't want to go get all those issues or whatever, and even then a lot of people don't want to, it's just difficult to do. It's cumbersome or whatever if you just want to read this.
I don't know how I would have. So what you're saying is the Blizzard was originally released in 12 separate books?
Yeah.
I would have been on the edge of my seat.
Like sarcasm?
No, I'm saying, like, if I was trying to read and digest this, to have to read it over a course of a year?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. But so a lot of people have not. And so don't say you're a bad comic book reader or whatever. The first one came out on April of 2022. Mm-hmm. But, not everybody has read this. But the trade paperback, the collected edition, the first thing called Tales of the Unnamed, that came out just a couple of weeks ago. This episode is going to air on Wednesday, August 7th. And this book came out, I think, 2 weeks ago, is when I picked it up at the local comic book shop, as they say. The first one came out April of 2022.
Okay.
Geiger 80-page Giant, as you recall, was the first appearance of Redcoat with the short story. That came out in February of 2022, 2 months before this. That's relevant because
read it.
It's relevant when you read it because there are characters from that comic that are in this comic for the second
character.
There are two.
Oh, was I not paying attention?
Two characters, one thing. All from that comic, yes.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna really have to... Maybe I breezed through this too quickly.
Oh, no.
I can't wait to discuss.
You probably know what I mean. You probably just aren't thinking of it the same way, or it might be minor. So, yeah. Now, that being said, I just got you all excited, right? Because I'm like, there are characters from Geiger 80-page Giant in this book. This is an awesome comic book. This is an entertaining comic book. 95% of this comic book doesn't really have anything to do directly with the Unnamed storyline, right?
I'd say 97%.
97. And so, but point is, it's not, you could just pick this comic book up and read it without knowing anything about Ghost Machine at all, and it would still be a good comic book. And you'd probably stumble upon the characters we're mentioning and being like, I wonder what that is. I wonder if there's a comic book about that one. And that's it. Like, knowing that it ruins nothing.
I think that this is a good comic book to kind of get yourself psyched for Hyde Street.
For Hyde Street? For the monsters?
Uh-huh.
Sure, because there's a monster. Yeah, there's a monster. Supernatural and tech involved here.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, well, let's get into the nitty-gritty. What's the creator roll call on this book, Snoggle? I know you did some research to be especially correct.
Especially correct. Well, the creators are Jeff Johns and Andrea Moody. And my accent is probably saying his last name wrong, but he is an Italian cartoonist and comic book artist. And then we have our king of letters, Rob Lee.
Yeah, Rob Lee.
Mm-hmm.
The cover of this thing by Andrea Moody. It's like a blood trail into some stormy mountains, and then there's like Sasquatch-looking silhouette.
I mean, it's a very captivating cover. You can look at it and feel like you're in a blizzard.
Oh, for sure.
I think that's pretty cool. And then when you open up, those first two panels are like that light blue iciness of like the blizzard is going.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really sweet too.
Yeah, and I like how the silhouette of the monster's claw, like on the inner cover, is like around what you can clearly tell. Like there's a child and somebody looks like a fireman or something because of the jacket.
No, it's super cool.
But it doesn't. It begins in winter, but it begins in winter at like a courthouse or whatever. And here's the thing: since we're going to deep dive like normal on this, but there are some things in this that are more conceptual because this is meant to be a short story per se. I would say, even though there are things that connect it to the awesome Unnamed universe that we love, this is a short story that doesn't rely on being part of the Unnamed at all. So the starts out in kind of a rough spot for a parent to be in, Yeah. It's a pretty rough one.
This is a pretty traumatic book. There, I think, are two incidents of like pretty sad violence. We begin where it's like outside of a courthouse and they're talking about a young kid who was at a birthday party. Who got kidnapped and then got murdered.
Yeah.
Which makes it very, very sad.
For sure. And you do get this kind of almost like empty, ghostly sense from Andrea's art. And I did just realize something, because Brad isn't on this one. Mm-hmm. So Andrea does the colors, which means that Andrea does the watercolors. Mm-hmm. So this is a very unique style. I like this art. It is obviously different than what we're used to in style, I would say. But I really like it in terms of how it shows winter. So I can see why it's, especially like his style, it really works for a story that has such an emphasis on isolation and cold and being disoriented.
I will say one thing in that first panel, basically the little kid's body was dumped behind a convenience store, but the guy who did it was told on by his own mother. I don't know if you caught that, but
I did catch that detail. I thought that was interesting.
Like, she turned in her son, which is good. I would hope, like, any parent would, but I don't know. I like that detail.
To me, that is a detail that makes the story more alive, as opposed to, like, a text box. It's like some comic books would literally just have a text box that would say, and after his mother turned him in. Like, it wouldn't be immersive in that way. And that does add a layer to the character. He's not on the pages for much longer at all.
Nope.
And so I don't really want to dwell on, what would you do conversation.
No, we shouldn't.
Yeah, all right, so you've read the book if you're here, right? We told you to read the book. And that means that what happens is the father of the murdered child shows up when the murderer is getting out of the cop car to go into the courthouse for the first day of his trial, and he kills him. He doesn't even run or anything, but then it becomes this story about the dad. And his name is Michael. And I really usually have a very difficult time with subject matter like this. But in this case, for some reason, it upset me, obviously, to think about any of these variables, which is why we don't have to do the what would I do conversation.
Yeah, we already know you're Michael. You do what he does. I mean,
sure. but what I'm saying is, as a reader, for some reason, it doesn't prevent me from moving forward. And in most media, that would make me change the channel.
I have to comment on some of these letters and some of the art on these 2 pages of where essentially Michael shoots the murderer in the head. So while the content is very unsettling, I do believe when they've pulled like vigilante justice.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it makes it a little bit easier to move on. 1, we know it's fiction. 2, you're kind of like, okay, all right, let's move forward. He probably shouldn't have killed him because now he's going to be in trouble. But I think that makes it easier for me to swallow. I will also say shout out to Rob Lee, because I'm not really a fan of violence, but the blam.
Yeah.
That looks so cool.
Like the blood red blam.
Oh, yeah.
Blood red blam.
And just, like, very artistically done on a headshot. In the colors, what Andrea did with the coloring. I mean, I think it was really good storytelling on that page.
You know the letters that I like better on that one? On that same page?
The thump?
Nope.
Yeah.
It's this, no, that's not the sound. It's not that sound. It's, which we've heard in every movie. When somebody gets shot and then falls against a window in a car. It's it's like a lengthy squeegee.
But then, in the next panel, he's obviously getting his mugshot, and it just begins the story, the real story, with a quote, "God is gracious to always give a warning before he sends judgment." And
that's interesting.
It is a fun way to start the actual story.
Yeah, maybe that's why it's not so jarring to me, because it's like, okay, this is the vehicle for this story, and it's tragic, but we can now move on to the circumstances, which are intriguing and suspenseful. And we do still get some information about him by his conversation between himself and his lawyer, who we do find out, like, agreed to just help him for free because he knows him. But we learn a ton about Michael. We learn about his relationship with his family, We learn about something from his past. Apparently he has a record, and that influences his lawyer's ability or inability to do much about the circumstances that he's in.
So they're charging him with second-degree murder, and he can plead no contest to manslaughter. But he doesn't have a clean record, so they're like, you're going to serve time no matter what. Could serve 7 years. They have that conversation.
And what's great about Jeff Johns' way of storytelling, Jeff Johns and Andrea's way of storytelling, is because this is showing us a story with visual storytelling that only a comic book can do. And then they do another thing that I really like that comic books do, and sometimes in movies, that is way better than a narrator or a text box just telling you what's happening, and that is using the news.
And we find out that, of course, this guy that he shot and killed, it wasn't just his son. It says, since Kelly's death, several missing children's cases have been connected to him, painting a horrifying picture of a serial killer who had been operating in and around Denver for the better part of a decade. So that dude was evil.
Absolutely. I think that adds another layer to the public had his back thing or whatever.
I do like that Sarah, the ex-wife, asked for them to be lenient.
But then we ultimately do understand that he's being transferred to this prison or sent to this prison in Colorado where typically rather dangerous people go. He's on the way in this armored personnel carrier looking tank thing. Ultimately, this is really where the story begins, right after this. Because what those newscasters are doing here, in my opinion, Ghost Machine fans, is they're kind of putting a button on the intro, right? And that's when we get this Con Air moment with Michael, our protagonist, I guess, in the back of the armored personnel carrier with other criminals. And the first one is arsonist that killed 37 students in a school.
Yeah, do you recognize me? I'm famous, too.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's the Steve Buscemi character. Wasn't he about fire? I can't remember.
No, Steve Buscemi ended up being the one that didn't do anything bad after he bebopped around, and we were all expecting him to skin a child. But remember, he didn't. There was a fire one. I don't remember which convict it was in Con Air that was the fire one. But yeah, you're right. There was a fire one. And it is similar to that deal. There's two cops that are driving this armored personnel carrier. There's already one of them saying they can't see anything. I think Jack and Jimmy. And then some cool noises that come from Rob. It's just this VW, ooh, SSH, coom type of thing. Imagine that's this armored personnel carrier stopping in a blizzard, right? And then they have to
slam on the brakes because Jimmy wasn't paying attention. Jimmy, look out. I mean, it's a blizzard. Already your eyes should be on the road. And he just straight up turns around to look at the other guy. Then hits this truck head on.
I like how Andrea does so many different facial expressions.
Yeah, they are really good.
Yeah, I really dig that. But yeah, it's like a pickup truck, right? Mm-hmm. And they end up crashing into each other. We get several panels with no dialogue that very clearly show them being rattled about. And then the cops get out.
Oh, I like the panel right before the cops get out, though. That just shows the mountain. And if you're looking outside of the vehicle, that the monster is standing up on that hill.
Yeah, because at first it looks like a pine tree, but then you look a little closer and you can see its legs and its claw.
So right before they get out, you get to know a little bit about another one of the convicts, because right now we know about the arsonist and obviously Michael, but it's a Mr. Stanton who robbed hundreds of his employees.
Yep. So they have a white-collar crime guy, they got an arsonist guy. Those are the boxes we have checked so far. And we got 3 scared cops. Because there's the 2... Yeah, okay, 3.
Of course, the radio isn't working. And then they're walking up to this truck, I'm going to see if everyone in that truck's okay. And they open the door, and it's just, literally a pile of guts and blood.
Yeah, it is literally a pile of guts and blood, because in another page turn you get a specific detail. But hey, I want to throw something out there. Since we've all read this whole comic and we've spoiled it, we know what happens as it continues. Mm-hmm. I just want to ask, because this always kind of happens to me when I read a comic a second or a third time. Since these people got killed in that pickup, we can assume they were guilty. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it is what it is.
What?
I'm just saying, like...
I think we're all guilty of something.
I don't think they got eaten like that because of a library book. They do specify that literally it's like skeleton and skin. Skin and skeleton. Left everything else, I believe. And then it's cool. We get this splash page, mostly splash page, because it takes up the whole 2 pages deal. But we have this cool lineup. Again, great expressions on the bottom of the page. And it's the 3 cops. And what's cool is that you get their names by them talking to each other. So you'll learn the cops are Lance, Jack, and Jimmy. And you'll learn a little bit about them. And then you learn the convicts are the arsonist guy, the kid killer. Mm-hmm. And then they have a guy named Boston. This says like murder during armed robbery. And then they got a drug dealer guy, and then they got the white collar crime guy. And it's really cool because it's like Isolation City with this Blizzard panel, and then each of them is like bum bum bum. Here's your cast of characters.
Is Lance the one who gets his later on?
I think so.
Okay. If that's true, I do think it's interesting that it says, given the state of this truck, Lance, we got more to worry about than them.
Because they see the meat.
Yeah, like, I don't know how you don't immediately freak out upon that. I would just be like...
Get back in the armored personnel carrier?
Yeah.
And just wait for the blizzard to die down?
Yeah, probably.
Just lock them in the back with a bottle of water? That is the thing. They know it's out there. They're like, is it bear? Is it a wolf? Like, no. Then you get to see, like, creepy convict conversation with Mike. And it is very similar to, like, I remember it makes me, now that we start talking about Con Air, there's a lot of similarities. Because there's some of them that are horrible jerks and some of them that aren't. And we do find out that the arsonist, but there were kids inside when he killed everybody. This is the first time he says this, and this is my favorite character in this comic book, is Boston. And he says, I didn't do anything. And somebody else is like, I didn't do anything either. I was framed. That's the white collar guy. Mm-hmm. But Boston, the whole time, he says he's innocent. And that, in the end, he's the guy that never sees anything.
Well, then the drug dealer calls it, facts. You know, the white collar guy, Mr. Stan, he says, the public cheered Mike on for what he did, but everyone wants you to hang. You're the most famous of us all. You're Sterling Stan, the Bernie Madoff of the middle class. Like, he's like, you stole from just, like, tons of people. And you find out a little bit more later on. But we get some of the color of, like, the players some more.
And it's neat how Andrea uses yellow for the light in some of these panels, I think. But they do decide they're all going to get out and try to push it. Oh, because it's stuck. So
they try to move it, and they can't.
And they can't, but this is also a moment when one of the first times that they kind of establish the guards are regarding Michael slightly differently than the others. Mm-hmm.
They, as well as us as a reader, we can understand why he did what he did.
Can you imagine in real life if the point about all the other children came about, that he would sit in prison and every day would get a new letter, a new package. Like, once he was out, people would treat him like such kindness. Like, you know, like, it would be so interesting to see that. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. But imagine if it wasn't if his child wasn't lost. Take that variable out, because that's what upsets us. And he just happens to be a guy that killed a serial killer. People would think that was pretty amazing.
That's why there's a debate on it, because obviously he's the one who decided this person had to die.
And he should.
But there are incidents where, you know, a judge decides that we're going to do capital punishment pending on the state, you know what I mean? And then everyone's like, yay. Yes. So that's why, you know, there are so many people who would err towards the side of, like, we get why he did what he did.
Yeah.
But
I mean more in the sense even that the guards, they don't seem to consider him a danger.
Yeah. So they start walking, right?
They do. They decide that they know there's a ranger station 3 miles away because they see a sign on the ground that indicates that. And it says mile 2. They know it's 3 miles away. So, like, they're really walking through this blizzard 3 miles. That's pretty rough. I don't know what kind of footwear those convicts have.
Well, and this says, like, mile 2. So that means they're on mile 2. They have a mile left to go. And I find it, like, of course, arson guy is like, I could build a fire. Of course you could, dude. And you see the monster, and then it creates an image. Like, how do you think this works? I guess we'll talk about it. But, like, the first person the monster goes for is Mr. Stanton. And he sees his assistant, Dolly. And he believes that she is actually in the woods.
I liked that Jeff chose to off him first. Mm-hmm. Because when you see her in the woods in her business outfit, like holding like a tablet or a notepad or whatever, it's very clear that she's out of place. And so you can tell it's some sort of illusion or disillusionment or some, like, you know, that is occurring. And so on that panel, he just looks at her and says, Dolly. And it's this panel, though, it's like colored this greenish yellow. To me, that's like terror. It's very clear that this is a thing as a reader that's like, oh, okay, they're seeing something that's not there.
Yeah.
And that helps me realize very quickly what's going on.
Oh my gosh. And then, like, so they're like, dude, he's going cuckoo, you know? Mm. There's nothing over there. And then Dolly continues to talk. Some of them couldn't face the financial ruin, Mr. Stanton. So they went to the roof. Do you remember? And you're just like, oh my gosh. Because, like, we thought it was, obviously it's awful that this man stole tons of money from hundreds of employees. But then you flip the page and he is actually seeing multiple people who jumped off the roof, like just falling all around him.
Yes, and I really think that Andrea's art excels at drawing people falling off a roof to their death. No, like right in the middle, there's a panel of a guy that is just like, you can see his tie, you can see his button down, you can see his business slacks, you can see the cut of his head. Like, it is very like, yep, I can see that. Yep, that's very clear with that. Like, just it is fantastic, these silhouettes of characters. And then somehow Rob was able to put the sound of not one, but 2 bodies hitting the ground next to that character. And, you know, at this point, to the others, they haven't seen something happen to somebody yet, but that's about to change.
And the cop is like, dude, insanity isn't going to work. When we get to the prison, you can't take that plea. And so he goes, I'm not, and he doesn't even get to say insane. And, like, at the bottom of this page, you see the panel where it's like, snatch. The monster's taking his head off. It's so horrifying. Like, the next page is just like, oh my goodness, I'm scared.
It's awesome because there's no dialogue needed. It's the next page, big panel at the top, monster holding guy's head. What's still cool is
he eats it.
He does, but you still can't get that great of a look at the monster yet. Like, there's still and I like that. He's still clouded by the blizzard. Everything is, everybody is facial reactions to what's happening and sounds. Like the sound that he makes when he roars up to the sky, holding dude's head. And then the sound of him crunching it as he chews it after putting it in his mouth. And at that point, it is abundantly clear to the reader, though, that everyone can see the monster, even though they couldn't see whatever Stanton was seeing. Because the guards are like, what's that? Oh my gosh. And then they're like, blam, 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 and they're shooting at it.
Of course. And then this, like, that big, what do we call these?
Splash page.
Splash page where it's like, rawr.
We're going to keep that one in. That's what
I'm wondering, like, what are these little, like, tubes hanging off from its belly?
That's what I meant about how we don't really get a very good picture of it until this page, because it does look as though we know it's been tagged, We don't know if there's tech in it other than the tag, or if the tag is the only tech. But it does have this belly with like these, it almost looks like some sort of alchemical, these like green orbs or globs, or I don't know. But they look cool and scary.
Yeah.
You know? And so he takes the guy and...
Well, the cops are like, run. And the convicts are like, well, no, duh. But we're chained up, dudes. And in the midst of this, of course, Michael sees his son, right?
Yes. So that's when we start to get the sense of, oh, this has a radius effect around it.
Oh my gosh, how sad is it, though, that he says, why didn't you get me before the bad man did?
Super sad. That's why I don't really talk about those.
Oh, are we moving forward? Sad.
No, it's okay. So... really, though, this is a whole splash page to that, and then you see the bad man standing behind. But that panel comes when Michael sees the head on the ground, too. But really, to me, this is when it's like, okay, so these visions, they happen around this creature. They happen around this creature, and that's what this is establishing for me. It is sad, but then the creature appears to, like, run away or whatever, right? And as it goes away... It gets away from them. Their proximity changes. We then go back to a conversation with tension between the guards and the convicts, and it doesn't seem to be that there's any immediate or danger.
Yeah, I still think it's pretty ridiculous that they won't just take off the chains. Like, there's obviously a life or death situation. No matter, this is almost like, the guards, the head person who makes that decision. Like, dude, a monster just came out of the woods, out of nowhere, and ripped a dude's head off and then like ate it. I would absolutely unchain the prisoners at that point.
Yeah, I'd probably unchain Boston.
I'd unchain them all. Who cares?
The fire guy just gives me like, I will betray everybody just for the sake of it vibes. But that's just me.
Yeah, dude with mustache hair. Maybe what's that guy's name? Lance?
Yeah, but that's what they're debating, is what you're saying right here. They're basically having the same argument, and then we do see a little aside between the cops that are like, well, let's just leave them here.
Because Lance is obviously a POS.
Well, yeah, and then Jimmy, though, he's like, my wife is having a baby, I gotta get back. And this is before we find out that he took on this job because he gambled all the money away and all that, whatever. Either way, that's his prerogative. And that's also when you start to see the cons start to try to, like, at the drug dealer one, he's starting to try to do
we
something.
Outnumber him, and then all of a sudden, Mike brings everybody back to reality because he's, like, sad. He's kind of like the gate between both parties, you know? And he's like, I saw my son in the blizzard, and he's so sad. And he just kneels down in the snow because he's already defeated.
But it nullifies the conflict. Because it allows one of the guards to be like, all right, let's go, all of us. And Boston, the good con, is like, yep, okay. And so everybody gets together to do that. And then they have to go back to Michael to ask him to get up off of his knees because he's still on his knees. And he looks up after Jack says to him that he's sorry to hear about his son. And he's just bawling and says, thanks, Jack. But then they get a move on, you know. Then they arrive at their destination, as it were.
Yes, they're in a cabin,
and it's a ranger station, right? And that's significant. So this is a place where, like, normally an officer of some sort of law enforcement would be holed up. But the blizzard is going strong, and they do note on their way in that there's a flipped over like truck. Outside the front, and somebody's like, I bet the monster did that or whatever. The thing must have done that. But quickly they do see that the place looks kind of deserted. What's his name? The drug dealer guy's looking for something to eat, and then it's not creepy at all. But
Mr. Toon starts a fire.
But he gets his whole page. Like, somehow Andrea made this guy like, this guy looks just so devious to me. This fire he just made looks like the coldest fire I've ever seen. But they do need to, like, actually get warm, so they don't really argue about it. And it's not like it gives them any type of combative advantage or makes them any more dangerous. They need it to survive. But I love that one panel. I feel like this is just to add to the ambiance or the tone. it's this panel where after everybody decides to accept the fire, you see him put in his pocket a matchbook secretly.
Mm-hmm.
But then the panel right below it, he says, "You see, who doesn't like a fire?" And it's like very foreboding, and I bet Jeff Johns would write a good serial killer joint. Is what I'm thinking. And then, woo, buddy!
Oh, this I bet was very exciting to you. So we get
this is the payoff right here. That's where it starts.
We get a little bit of a timeline for this creature. First disappearance, August 15th, 1933. A student named Joe Halpern. 2 more missing, 1987. A year after that, someone else vanished from that bookstore. Oh, here's where it's good. On February 28, 2019, James Pruitt disappeared right here in Glacier Gorge. He was the 3rd person to go missing that year. They called Redcoat
to
capture it.
In 2019.
But what's Redcoat? And to capture what? That creature? It wasn't a ranger, it was someone else. And then you see the symbol. What is it, Nick Wilson?
Well, it's a badge. It says USA on one side, and then the badge itself is the symbol of the Founding Fathers.
Mm-hmm.
So we know this takes place in present day because they're reflecting on 2019, which is not that long ago. It appears that whoever was using the ranger station was also the owner of the badge. P.S. It looks as though the characters could see the picture on that badge. We can't. So to me, that means that the creators of this story were like, hey, the point you need to take from this is that it's a Founding Fathers badge. You don't need to know who it is.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they would tell us that.
And they were obviously guilty. They're gone.
And it's neat. It's like, what does a park ranger need a badge like this for, Jimmy? And it's like, that's not a park ranger, buddy. Who knows what that is? We're going to find out as we keep reading the pages of Redcoat.
Right. So then they're all like, okay, we're going to go to sleep. Hopefully the monster doesn't get hungry again. And Boston talks to Mike. Did you see your son? Did you really see him? Stanton said he saw things too. So why didn't it kill you like it killed him? He says, I don't know. And then they hear a loud noise. Bam! They're all trying to sleep. So what I find very interesting, and anyone who's ever watched a horror movie, is they hear that loud noise, and anyone listening to this podcast would not open the door. It's a blizzard outside. And what does Toons do? Opens the freaking door. You know there is literally a monster outside that can rip people's head off. And what he sees on this splash page is like really scary. Hi, Mr. Toons.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of burning senior students. I was wondering that as well at first. I think he opened the door because he kind of could see through the window and saw that. And it does seem like part of what this monster does to you is it does distract you and get your attention with whatever the illusion is that's related to your guilt.
That makes sense. So then this was like a twist for me. You got Lance, already the officer who's been awful, says Officer Lance, and we turn the page, and this was so sad for me because it is obviously a little kid that Lance has seen because Lance shot that little kid.
Yeah, it's super sad, and I think that from a storytelling standpoint, it's very good because this is a moment where we need an unexpected, right? Like we're expecting that monster. Yeah. We're expecting more gore. We're expecting more behead. We're not expecting this jarring turn, which is that everybody is guilty that we know of in this situation of something. Like we haven't seen what everybody's thing is, but this allows us to see, oh, okay, like that's one of the cops this thing.
Well, it's very interesting with so many people in there that, the thing could construe as guilty. It first, the cop, that, good storytelling. I was like, oh, I audibly gasped when I turned the page to see this, because I thought, when it was like officer, when it says Officer Lance, I thought it was just like one of the inmates. Mm-hmm. And then you turn the page and get that. And you're just like, oh gosh. And the other inmates are like, the cop and Miss Antunes are seeing stuff.
Right. And that actually is a moment when I thought, because we have seen some mechanical restrictions related to creatures and monsters and powers in the world of the Unnamed, I don't know that we see the monster cause more than 2 people at a time.
Yeah.
To see it. Because if it's just a radius effect that just happens, then right now Michael should be seeing his son, and the drug dealer guy should be seeing something.
Yeah, he chose his order for whatever reason that he chose his order. What I find really interesting, so like obviously they're both in this state where Tunes is seeing the kids, Lance is seeing the kid he shot, and he goes like, he doubles down. You weren't innocent. You weren't. And just this whole panel at the end with the little boy, and it says blam, and he's crying. I'm like, oh my gosh, the emotion. And he literally thinks this is happening and shoots the little kid again and accidentally shoots Jimmy. I am shocked. And like this happens and he's like, kid wasn't innocent. He shoplifted, and the creature just whooshes him out the window like, nope, you're dead, dude.
Yeah, Rips essentially breaks the entire window out of the wall cavity. And then he dies horribly as he's attempting to shoot the monster, but the monster basically like has him by the skull, like actually by the skull. So this is a gruesome situation.
It is. And I gotta be honest, and I think everyone here, I wasn't too mad when that cop got ripped through the window. I was like, yay!
I think that this is the storytellers positioning it in such a way where they're saying like, this is really horrible, and that's why the monster's gonna get the guy right now.
And then at the bottom of it, we've got Michael. And it says, you're next, Daddy. It's going to kill you all for what you've done. Oh.
Yep.
And then you get this page of just, like, showing what's happening to Lance. Like, oh, my gosh.
Yeah, dude's head. Just a whole page of dude's head.
Ugh. And then Jimmy's just like, he shot me. What calamity just occurred? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because then the fire is still going. They got a window now with the blizzard blowing into the building. There's all these fantastic fire sounds. That every panel is like a crate fire sound. And you even get like the sounds of them getting and using the fire extinguisher. And so all this is happening. There's been so much great pacing. Like there's so much tension. Like your heart is beating at this moment by reading this comic. And then you do see Michael's son come back.
I find this so interesting because he says the monster is going to come back, Dad. It's coming for the guilty. And Boston says, Michael? And Michael goes, it's my son again. You can't see him, but I can. And he goes, no, man, I see him, which leads me to believe if we've already got all this stuff going on, I do believe that's like Michael's or Adam's actual ghost. I don't know how, but that doesn't seem to be the same as the projection that's coming from the monster. Does that make sense?
It does, but this is one where I do really want to say, email us at ghostmachinefans@gmail.com and let us know what you think about this. We're talking about how Michael's son's, like, it looks more like a ghost. I agree. It doesn't look like part of the illusion. It's like, he's saying, like, it's coming for the guilty, blah, blah, blah. But also, Boston, the guy we know who is not guilty, who doesn't see any illusions of badness, says he can see him. Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear anybody's analogy of that. Like, that's some deep stuff, man. That's pretty cool to me. Mm-hmm. That happens. And then he goes away, the fire goes away, And everything kind of calms down for like a second, but Jimmy's super bleeding. Like, it doesn't look like that's going to just stop.
Oh, yeah. And, like, I believe Lance's head was ripped right off.
Oh,
they
yeah.
just got, like, that body in there.
I mean, they're still in the moment. There's still a lot of urgency here.
Yeah.
But in the distracted moment, the Van Winkle drug dealer guy,
give me your guns.
yeah, he snags. And then we get a full splash page. It seems like each character got one in their own right. Each convict, at least.
Which is cool.
Yeah. And
I like that.
He's pointing the gun at them. Another great facial expression. And it's like, give me your guns right now. But then there is a brief interlude. This is the first time in a while where we've seen any other setting. And we get this 2-page deal with some folks that are talking.
Like, where are they?
And it's interesting. One of them is a warden. But then the guy standing right behind the warden, I just noticed this, doesn't look like, it kind of looks like he's wearing military garb. So I don't know how significant that is. He doesn't have the symbol of the Founding Fathers, so
yeah,
we're not that far.
Then but we go back to, of course, we're in the cabin again. And this dude, like, why in this, someone literally just got their head ripped off. Like, this guy annoys me so much because he all of a sudden, like, in all this calamity is like, I've got the upper hand here. I've got this gun. Give me your guns. Why, dude? Do it later.
Yeah, what are you going to do? What, like, are you going to go strap on your snowshoes and
what
your
an idiot.
Parka? Like, no, come on. And so, I feel like this is one of those scenes you've kind of seen before, and they all... Everybody stops him and then ties him to a chair and then decides he's... Short version, everybody stops him, ties him to a chair, and decides he's going to be bait for the monster.
Yes, they tie him to the chair, and then Boston and Michael get untied.
Yes.
They obviously, they helped, and they're like, they chose their sides. We're still going to take them to prison after this, but... we're gonna, give them their fighting shot. And
this is what's cool. When they say that they're untied, they just show a panel for each of them with the sound of manacles being removed. They don't have to be like, and then the cops decided those were some good guys. So it's just like, okay, great. Got it. Awesome. So everybody's established who's on whose team. Everybody's on the same team but Van Winkle that's left alive. And so they decide that they're going to kill the thing if they get together. And they think about it because ultimately they're like more organized, essentially, is really all they're saying.
Well, yeah, I do like how they're like, well, wait, why did I see, like, Boston comes back? I saw what Michael saw. Why? And I genuinely think, and this is again, listeners, please let us know what you feel. Because I think that at some points his son is kind of like saving him from the monster a little bit. That's why I genuinely think Boston saw it at one point. I think there's a difference between like kind of like this ghost type person and the actual monster. But I like how they're like, we're gonna hunt it back.
Right.
And they literally just left dude out on the porch, which, you know what? Serves him right.
Yeah. They decide that they're gonna use him as bait. And before they put him out there is when we do learn that little detail about Jimmy and him taking the ship because he gambled their money away. Which I understand that it doesn't make me like or dislike Jimmy any more or less or whatever. But it does tie in later, obviously.
Yeah.
Because it helps us understand the scope of the guild, right?
Yeah.
Because he didn't kill anybody. But... there's some of it there. I guess it's interesting because it's like, well, does the creature only kill guilty things, or is it more effective the guiltier you are because it has more to work with? Yeah,
I think it's neat that they go over like what they're all going to see. I love that Boston again is like, I told all of you I'm innocent. I didn't do anything, and they're like, okay.
How happy would I be if that Boston guy shows up again in something else one day?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool. But they do eventually put the Van Winkle on the patio.
Yep.
So they've got him outside. He's already screaming. He's asking to be put back in. And that doesn't last very long. It looks like they're trying to get pretty organized with their guns. And their plan is that if they all focus fire, essentially, they're figuring, well, something's got to kill that.
I just find it funny that the drug dealer says... suddenly he does see it. And he's like, let me in. I'm sorry. He like already knows his head's about to get ripped off.
Oh, yeah. And then he's like, he has a little moment where he sees, I guess, some of the people that got some of his bad drugs.
Yeah.
And apparently he had a rather wide
I bet you
array
wish
of customers.
you were in prison, Van Winkle, instead of out here with all of us.
Yeah, but and they're surrounding the monster with his globulous belly of sorts. And that's when he starts yelling, he's here, come on out and shoot it, come on out and shoot it. And they do that. And this is a sweet splash page, like 2 whole pages of comics dedicated to the top half, shooting out at this monster. And then this awesome, I just can only imagine the kind of howl/roar that this thing let out. Each of them on the next page gets a panel for their shot. It's who's left is Michael, Jimmy, Jack, Boston. And on Boston, it's a click, not a blam.
Yep. Which means he went to go shoot and it didn't shoot. And this indicates to us, obviously, the monster is willing to protect itself.
Correct.
Because it basically pushes him away and then it grabs Jimmy. And like Jimmy starts to see his wife and Jack's like, get down, and ends up helping Jimmy by shooting the creature.
Which does appear to make him let him go. Legitimately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he drops him, and then that part of the vision stops.
And it's back to Adam.
The storm's never going to stop, not until all the guilty men on the mountain die.
Oof. Fast forward to the next page, which this whole panel is great. Obviously, this is when the monster gets the drug dealer. You get that awesome panel at the top with the like, which I think looks amazing. It's not my fault they died. Like, I mean, his head gets ripped off. This monster seems to really like to rip off heads.
Mm-hmm.
And then Adam says, it's over, Dad. It's an eye for an eye. That's why it's here.
Yeah, and then more visions do continue for each of them, right? Even the other cop who's yet to see something eventually sees his little cousin who like died when by falling into the ice and he didn't save her, type of thing. So that's everybody on the list except Boston. And that also makes you wonder, it's like, well, does the creature, after the creature runs out of, things that you're immediately guilty of, does it pulls deeper into your psyche? So if it was to like find a person that had like never done anything wrong, it would be like a horrible nightmare, like that one time when you went commando to school or didn't brush your teeth or whatever.
Well, I feel like these are people who, whether how much they just, like, some of them is just the guilt they actually feel. And obviously Boston doesn't feel any because he gets this axe and he just straight up, and I felt like this was so sweet, just chopped half the creature's arm off.
Yeah, it would be really cool if he became some sort of like monster hunter throughout the 21st century, because people liked him from this book, just something.
Yeah.
Like, even a side character that occasionally popped up, and he's got an axe. He's got like a whole bunch of other cool stuff, but he's like, oh, he's got the axe.
Yeah. I love this next page because it's like they all just start shooting the creature except for obviously Michael. And Boston's like, come on, dude, let's go. Like, who cares if you killed the child killer? Any father would have done it. I would have done it. And then Michael's like, I should have picked him up at the park. It foreshadows into, what's about to happen, because he's like, he asks Boston, do you have kids? And Boston says, yeah, but... And Michael goes, get back to them. I will too. And he starts to run towards the creature. And we don't realize this yet, but he has a plan.
What is his plan?
Well, his plan is to make the creature run after him into that house. And he's going to cause, as we see, an actual huge explosion that incinerates both him and the creature.
Yeah, and I do want to distinguish, this is a BWOOOSH. And that's significantly different than a boom.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that was a much more appropriate propane tank going into a fireplace to blow up a building sound than a boom.
Mm-hmm.
So, way to go, Rob.
And they're all like, no, Michael. And then you get to see, like, it's okay now, Dad. And that's why, again, I think it was an actual ghost.
It was an actual ghost.
Because they even see it, too. This time it's really me. And then the 3 survivors are like, you all seeing that?
They see him, yeah. They see the 2 of them. Because really what they're seeing is they're seeing Ghost Dad hugging Ghost Son. Because he's dead at that point. And what's cool about it is the way we know that they're really seeing it, only it's Boston and the 2 cops that remain. And they're looking on, and part of the yellow-green from, like, the magical light around Michael and his son is in their field of vision, but not all of it. So it's very clear, like, yeah, everybody can see that. But nobody sees the chunk of the monster that's still on the ground with some sort of tech on it that, to me, looks like a tracking chip. And it does start to kind of buzz as if something's going on.
Again, Boston said, I told you I'm innocent. But he's getting tired of telling people that.
But then we do get that validated. And so this is the whole thing. This is what I was saying in the beginning.
The last 2 pages.
Well, you get so much out of this. But imagine yourself in April of 2022. You've read Geiger 1 through 6 and Geiger 80-page Giant. You've only ever seen Simon in that short story, right? And you have only seen Junkyard Joe in Geiger 5 and 6. And so we do get some exposition that's typed out in very, like, it's meant to be coming from a
file.
Yes.
The 3rd survivor, Boston Brace, had his conviction overturned this week when DNA tied another convict to the murder he was charged with.
And then he became a monster hunter. Maybe. I just think that's a great idea. After that, on the Blizzard file, there's a file, and it has, again, the symbol of the Founding Fathers on it. And we do know that this discussion and this file and the person making a phone call to someone else is at the Pentagon, because we see that. And the person making the call outbound from the Pentagon says to the other person, we're hoping we can persuade you to catch it again, Mr. Pure.
Catch it again? Not bloody likely.
Is what he says back. And then right away it's like, oh, a British bloke there with the bloody thing. But he even says, you should have let me kill the bastard back in 19. And he means 2019.
And the person on the other line says, it's an endangered species, Mr. Pure.
Right. And then he's like, thanks to me, now I'm telling you this same thing I told you when you called me to get the robot. So now he says that he's been called to try to get Joe before. And he says, piss off. And then you get a full page spread of red coat. And it's neat because behind him, he's got a whole bunch of different era weapons hanging on the wall. And in the bottom corner, it says the Unnamed. And so, back then, that's what's neat about this story. I liked this story a lot. I don't think, like I said, you could take the Unnamed part out and it could be its own short thing. Like it could be just a horror suspense movie story and I would dig it, But the fact that it does tie back, it's awesome. And I would love to see Boston resurface in some way. Just shout out to him.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, super fun. Awesome to see Andrea's work. Something that's a different style than what we've been seeing typically. Which means that now we have to talk about a very important listener mail. This one is not from a Ghost Machine fan. This one is from a Ghost Machine creator. This one is from Mr. Gary Frank, who is the co-creator of Geiger, and he does all the art on that. I think you all have heard us talk about him quite a bit. And this is what Mr. Frank says. I was just listening to your latest podcast. He says he enjoyed it. BT dub. So thank you, Gary. And you were puzzling over Nate's relaxed mask discipline and Geiger's quick loss of power. And I thought I'd fill in the blanks. You remember in Ground Zero, the radiation was a lot more dangerous, that nasty trucker at the end was panicking like crazy as soon as it was removed, his mask was removed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was because they were close to ground zero for one of Molotov's dirty bombs. In the beginning of issue 2, they're using a Geiger counter. He's referring to issue 2 of the current ongoing series. In the beginning of issue 2, they're using a Geiger counter to test the radiation levels of the Bohr family because the strength of the radiation varies. This means that A, the air is not uniformly dangerous, and B, Tariq's power reserve isn't so quick to replenish.
So he needs it.
Well, because if he was closer to radiation, he would replenish faster.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that if he got far enough away for long enough, he could deplete.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for those awesome answers, Gary. We obviously love your work, and we are happy to announce that our next Ghost Machine Creator interview will be with you, and we're very much excited about that. We will continue our conversation with him on the show.
Super excited.
But this has been a doozy. We had a lot to talk about. Emotions.
I know.
Rot.
I know.
Ups, downs. You never know.
All around.
Peaks and valleys.
Ebbs and flows.
There you go. Do you have anything else for the episode, my dear?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, just as a reminder, you can find all of our awesome content at www.ghostmachinefans.com, where you'll find our Instagram, our wiki, and our forums. The best place to see our daily content is on Instagram, where we post videos and other cool stuff every single day. We would love to hear from you on there, or at ghostmachinefans@gmail.com. You can also check us out on Twitter, aka X, under Ghost Machine Fans. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast.
Podcast.
Turtle.